Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We're ready to start our council meeting. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Hello. Thank you. Perhaps my voice is a little too soft, or you were having such a great time fellowshipping, but we're ready to start our meeting. This is a regular meeting of the El Centro City Council. We will have roll call, please.
Mayor Sanders.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Solomon. Absent. Councilmember Villegas Walker.
Here.
Councilmember Silva.
Here.
And Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
We'll have Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Silva and the invocation by Councilmember Walker.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lift your name standing and bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you at the start of another meeting. Help us to be mindful of the community we represent. On a grander scale, help us to be mindful of the need for peace in this world. Help us to be grateful for the very many blessings that you bestow upon us. Please bring us peace at this time of great trouble throughout the world. These things we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
This is going to do the closed session, right? You're not.
We will have our report out from our city attorney later on in the evening, but we want to welcome Mr. Childers here to stand in the stead of Mrs. Becker. But Ms. Becker will be joining us in approximately half hour to 45 minutes. At that time, we will have the report out from our closed session. This is a public meeting, and any person wishing to address the City Council, the successor agency to the RDA, and the housing agency is asked to complete a blue speaker slip, submit to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. When the item is announced and your name is called, we ask that you come forward to the microphone stating your name and address for the council. Unless the mayor extends the time, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. If you wish to address the council on any subject matter that is not currently on the agenda but in the council's jurisdiction, you may do so at a time at what we categorize as the time of public comments, which is maybe around 8 o'clock-ish. 8 o'clock in the evening, that is. That's not on this, but that's my made-up version of what we're going to be trying to accomplish today. I have no presentations to make at this time, but we do have some scheduled public comments, and we have this presentation by Mr. Joab Gonzalez from IVROP.
Good evening, respectable City Council members. My name is Joab Gonzalez, and I understand that for the record you need my address. I do live in El Centro, so my address is 1202 North 8th Street, El Centro. So I'm here today representing IVROP, representing my boss, Mary Camacho, and she has allowed me to manage 2 of the programs, which is Project Toy and Project Camino. Some of you are very familiar because of your involvement with the Workforce Development Board. So at this time I would like to go ahead and proceed with the presentation. We do have a PowerPoint that I would like to present with you, but maybe if I need to set it up somewhere while I set up the PowerPoint, we can have the students go ahead and talk about their experience. And do you mind if we go over just a little bit over the 3 minutes?
Not at all. I think it's for worthy reason.
Okay, I think you're going to enjoy the presentation, and I'd like to call Dalia Loera so that she can go ahead and speak to you. And this is in regards to the funding that was provided based on the fundraising opportunity from the Imagine Awards. We stretched those dollars and we were able to take 2 additional youth, aside from the funding that we had from the Youth Council and the regular WIA allocation. So we stretched those dollars and we were able to take 2 additional youth to Washington, and they're about to present to you what their experience was. Okay?
Thank you.
With that being said, no further ado, Dalia.
No, you come to the microphone, please.
Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Dalia, And I would like to thank the City Hall of Central of giving me the amazing opportunity of going to Washington, D.C. It was an amazing opportunity. I never thought I was going to be over there near to Obama. And it was really grateful meeting other people from other states, knowing like also their community problems, and seeing all the monuments and all the things about the history. And I met a lot of new people, and which I am glad for the experience that can make us help our community, and I'm really glad for that experience.
Thank you, Dalia. Let's give her a round of applause. Mr. Gonzalez, is there another young presenter?
Yes, we have Dulce Gutierrez, if I got the name correct this time. Dulce is here to present to you. Come on, Dulce. I always crisscross the name, sorry.
You can lower the microphone.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dulce Rodriguez, and I would really like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to go to Washington. If it wasn't for you guys and your help, I wasn't gonna be able to enjoy that experience. It was very helpful. We went to see all the monuments, which helped me realize all the good things that we have done in this nation. And also it helped me get more involved into our community, since we were addressing problems that everybody had, and they were the same problems all around the nation. And it was very, very interesting and helpful. And well, without it, I guess I wouldn't be speaking right now, because I wouldn't be involved like I am right now and speaking up. So I would really, really like to thank you guys. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a few slides that I wanted to show you of just some pictures of the youth in Washington. I think that's much, much better. So like they were saying, they went to go see the monuments. They actually got this is a very structured program where they actually get to, every day they have a schedule from 7 o'clock all the way to 11 o'clock. They pretty much train the kids so that they're not, doing anything that they're not supposed to. And they monitor the kids the whole time. They're well monitored, aside from our staff that goes along with them. The other thing that I'm here to present is on, again, I'm being taught by Mary, and I know Mary knows, Mary, she stretches her dollars. So we stretch her dollars, and we also were able to paint, as community service, the Resource Center, Family Resource Center. They're your neighbors here. They're about 2 blocks away from here. And just so you know what the Resource Center is, it provides resources to youth and adults, services to foster youth, office space for social workers. Today there was about 4 or 5 social workers seeing families and strategizing on how they're going to help the community. How they're going to help those families keep their youth, their kids, because maybe they're going through some social work through CPS. There's counseling services, health services, so it's a very centralized location, but above all, it's providing our staff, 3 of our staff, including myself, free space. So we're saving about $20,000 in rent per year, phones, internet, and that money we use it directly on the students. We did not use it for program, we turned it into the students. So that was a really good opportunity. So here are the kids painting the Resource Center. We did it in about 2 days, so we pretty much did the frames, we did the walls, pretty much everything, we pretty much did it. The paint cost about $260, so we bought that from the remaining balance that we have from the fundraising. So pretty much we ran over, so this is what's next. From the partnership that we have with the City of El Centro, we want to continue to do more community service, and we want to take, and this is not just me, the youth also that we're presenting here today, they have come to my office and they already scheduled meetings with their representatives. Manuel Perez, he's going to be contacting us to see when he's going to see us. We're going to be contacting the legislators in the federal level, and we're going to be telling them that the youth are the future of this nation and that we need more services for them. When I went to school, there was like maybe 4 or 5 programs that I could choose from to do work experience. Right now they have 1 or 2 in a very limited way. So I really feel like we need to tell, just like they invested in ourselves, we need to invest in our youth. So pretty much special thanks to the city council, the city staff who contacted us, Debbie and her supervisor, I think it's Ms. Piedra, Marcelo, the supervisor of her department, and everybody for working with our program. We really appreciate everything that you have done. This is the only city that actually supports our efforts in this particular way. You also take our students and provide work experience opportunities here at the City Hall. Your water department also contacted me that they want to provide additional opportunities, internship opportunities, so we really, really appreciate that. That really speaks very highly of the city, of the city council, and all the staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before you leave, let's see if there's any council member who wish to make any comments to either yourself or to those young people who came forward and made their presentations.
Okay.
Ms. Walker, you have any comments?
Well, I'm very, very excited that you had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., because I think you can see it in pictures, but until you're actually there and see how ginormous those monuments are and really get a flavor of how government works in Washington, D.C., you really can't experience it unless you're there. So I think that's really cool that you had an opportunity. And with as far as ICOE is able to stretch $1, I think you should have stayed in Washington, D.C. to help get things under control. But you do an outstanding job with this program, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Silva?
Thank you, Hua, for the wonderful work that you do for our community, and particularly for our young people. You know, I couldn't help but really relate to the comments that were made by the 2 young ladies earlier today. And I'll share with you that my very first trip to Washington, D.C. was also through a Hispanic leadership program that allowed me to go over there, and the same experiences that you had in terms of, you know, being struck by the monuments and meeting my congressman for the first time, and that experience. You know, as I go back and reflect on that, I can tell you that made a significant impact on my life. I didn't know at the time that I would become a council member and a dean and other things, but that was just one piece of my development. So I hope and I know that that's also another piece for you, and that in, who knows, you know, 10 years, 15 years, or maybe sooner, we can see one of you young ladies sitting at this side of the table, and I fully expect that from all of you guys. So congratulations, and keep it up.
Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I'd also like to commend you. I think, you know, I have a similar story to Mr. Silva's. My first opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. was actually through the Boy Scouts of America, but it was a leadership development and national jamboree that I was able to go to, and it's certainly as a teenager, it's very, you know, awestruck is how I was. I mean, just to see the fact that this is how government works, and this is where most decisions are made, certainly at the federal level. But hopefully you'll continue your investment in government, and you'll pursue something along the lines of getting involved either on a community level through some association or service club. There's certainly some good service clubs in El Centro to get involved with, and I'd like to see you guys pursue that. So, congratulations. And I'd also like to say there's 3 of us that serve on the Workforce Development Board, and anytime we see youth, I think that from the Workforce Development Board standpoint, one of our strongest assets in Imperial County has always been the support of our youth, and just heads and shoulders above most counties in the state of California. And I think that we truly, I'm glad that El Centro is a city that also takes part in supporting that effort. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, you know, it's always a delight. We were delighted last year to see the young people that you brought before us, but I also want to commend our staff for taking the approach and being innovative in how we go out and reach these young people and give them the opportunity for this type of development and expanding their horizons by looking for ways to assist financially so that they can make these trips to Washington and see not only the monuments, but meeting their legislative body and understanding the role that they play in making this happen. Part of citizenship is doing exactly what you're doing for them. And as they develop into their own, in which listening to both Dulce and Dalia, I'm convinced that we have some outstanding leaders right there among the ones that you were talking about. So I want to congratulate the students. I want to congratulate our staff for taking this innovative approach and making sure that we can continue to be a support. And also commend Mrs. Camacho for her efforts in being able to stretch that dollar. I concur with Ms. Walker. Maybe your innovation in that regard would have been wonderful to share those ideas with the powers that be in Washington.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, thank you again for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank all of you for being present.
And if you don't mind me wrapping up by just saying also that I want to thank my staff who also is very supportive, and they're the backbone of my program, and I don't think I would have the success that I have if it wasn't for them. So I have two of them here, Rosa and Viridiana, who are very committed to our program. And the other thing is we're also looking at, you're going to be hearing from us because we're partnering with the health department. They're contracting our youth to go out there and advocate. I got to be the first one to pay attention, to be more healthy and eat more, drink more water and eat healthier. So we're going to go out there and we're going to be talking to the schools, the kids, and El Centro is going to be the first location where we're going to go out there and do just that. They're going to provide funding, incentives for the youth. They're going to pay some of the mileage that we're going to incur. So partnerships are just excellent, especially right now with budget cuts. They're going to be very helpful in helping our community. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thanks everybody in the public as well.
Okay, thank you. Are you staying for the remaining of our meeting? Okay, all right. You have another commitment. Okay. All right. Our next item on the agenda will be our consent agenda. Consent agenda items are approved by one motion. Council members or members of the public may pull in items to be considered separately at a time determined by the mayor. Are we pulling any items, ladies and gentlemen? Item 7, maybe? No, you don't need to pull item 7? Okay.
I'll vote for approval of items 2 through 9.
Second.
It's been moved by Jackson, second by Walker. For approval of ballot, please. My fingers walked a little too fast.
The motion carries 4-0.
Okay. We have a new business item. It's a discussion and any necessary action regarding the El Centro Regional Medical Center annual charge for administrative support. Presentation will be made by, Mr. Romero.
Honorable Mayor, council members, before you tonight we have the recommended motion to approve the annual administrative charge to El Centro Regional Medical Center in the amount of $38,500.
Question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Was ECRMC consulted with regard to the modification to the charge, and did they approve of the analysis conducted by city staff to arrive at the charges?
No, they were not. We did those as directed by council as what our charges were. Now, we shared with the net number with Mr. Green, but the analysis came directly to the council.
And I see that Mr. Green and the CFO, Alex Wells, are present in the audience. I wonder if either of those gentlemen are in a position to comment with regard to the charge. And let me just kind of explain to you where I'm coming from. In the banking industry, if we have an affiliate that we're providing services for, it's called a Reg W situation, and you have to make sure that the services that you're providing are market competitive and that you're not overcharging or undercharging your affiliate for the services that are being provided. I see this as an analogous situation where we have common ownership, right, of the hospital being owned by the city, it seems to me that it would be appropriate for the hospital administration, CEO and/or the CFO to understand how we came up with the $38,500 and whether or not they agree with how that was determined.
The direction I gave to finance was that this was actually not an affiliate but as the home versus branch. That was it's just an approach.
Right, and I would like to see a collaborative approach as opposed to a top-down or I think the term in bankruptcy actually is cram-down. So if you don't mind, if we could approve this, but also leave the opportunity open for the hospital to come back and request modification if they so choose.
Would anybody from the hospital like to speak now to this issue? I think Mr. Duran did say that he provided them the information, so they may be able to share some things with us.
As Ruben pointed out, he did share with me the number, which I shared with Mr. Calderon at a meeting yesterday at the Governance Committee, but there's no detail on it other than it was for support. So, I mean, we're aware there was support. The support included the expenses for the interaction with the city attorney as well as with Mr. Duran serving as our treasurer and in those capacities. So that's all we know about it at this point.
I understand that there's a spreadsheet that took into account. Now, I don't think that we need to include salary information or information of a personal nature like that, but the breakdown by department, I think, would be...
Well, and absolutely. So it has to do with methodology. There are several methodologies, and we took the one of home branch methodology. But we'll certainly provide you with how we came up with hours, of what the annual hours are, and what's the divisions that were associated with it. And Mr. Romero and I will get together, so we'll provide that. It's in one of the sheets separate of how we arrived at those hours. And each department looked at those independently. I will say that from the finance department, they looked at this in a very conservative, in the sense of, as opposed to moving the numbers up, is really how many hours do you think you're really going to spend? And that's how these numbers were generated, of the amount of time that we're going to be spending with on their matters. And that's why we looked at this and that methodology was what the amount that the council finally charges is a separate matter. What we're indicating is these are the number of hours we believe we're going to be working on hospital matters. And clearly the big change is in the legal section. And that was the other one that was not addressed, because the old numbers, by the way, we never found any data for those old numbers. They go back so far, so they never really addressed Treasury. They did not address the number of items. So that's where the methodology, we started out with how many hours are you doing? We didn't start with a number, and we think we came up with it. But we certainly will share that with you. There was not an indication of hiding anything or keeping it from you. This is what we believe we're doing. And we'll certainly share that of what that methodology was. And Mr. Romero and I will get together and just email it over to you tomorrow.
It would be helpful to share that with the board, I'm sure.
Mr. Silva? Sure, Mr. Silva.
Maybe it would be prudent to continue this item and have, in the spirit of collaboration and communication, that we let the hospital and our city manager staff have some communication, and then bring this back at our next meeting.
Mr. Jackson, do you have any comments you'd like to make? All right. I know that for some time this council has certainly been looking at this. I want to say maybe a year or more, and have done everything I think that we could possibly do to try and make sure that this would be a smooth transition as you went about securing your own legal counsel. In that regard, I see a slight difference between a public sector and a private sector. I see a slight difference there. However, I have no problem if there is a level of, I want to use the word discomfort, and whether or not this is an overcharge or an undercharge. And certainly no one wants to do anything on the side of under, but we don't want to do anything on the side of over. I think to me, it looks rather balanced. There will be a savings for the hospital of $161,000, so I see that as a significant piece. So as we go back and look at this and have staff crunch these numbers, if possible, even more, then we'll bring it back in October. Mr. Duran, do you think that gives you ample time?
Well,
Mr. Green, does that give you?
Unless there's a hiccup, we'll bring it back the next meeting.
Yeah, that would be fine. We have been able to secure.
Okay. And I see Alex, I don't know, I saw you lean forward. I wasn't sure if you wanted to come forward, or was that just an adjustment in your seat? You were just adjusting. Okay, all right. Okay.
But we do appreciate the council doing this, because we have taken advantage of seeking outside counsel. We are using some local counsel on an interim basis, but just so you know, we are also working on a joint powers authority with Palomar Pomerado, who has a 3-man team with some additional legal counsel on an adjunct to that we are now working together so that we can more efficiently access the additional broad scope of health services without having to pay the $500-600 an hour people. And that's coming together, and that'll be presented to the board next month as well. So just so you know, it is working, I think, towards something that will be very beneficial to all parties involved.
Okay, Mr. Silva, you sit on do you sit on the committee that would be looking at this, Mr.
No.
Silva? No. Okay. I was thinking that we have that liaison and he was part of that committee.
No.
Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Would that be in addition to the agreement already in place with Mr. Pace?
Well, we're having them work together. So I've talked to Pat, then I've talked to them about integrating him for some on-site stuff, the stuff that's local, that makes sense for that, and then they would be able to not only back that up, but fulfill all the other broader scope issues. Our challenge is always getting the physician and the healthcare related issues integrated into our contracts to make sure that we've met all of the requirements of the Stark and kickback statutes and all of those things that take specialists to do. And since they've already hired individuals and they're focused on doing that on a regular basis, we could, the economies of scale by both of us pooling on that would work very well for us. And I think we can do that, and that is in addition to working with Pat. So they're very, they plan on working with him.
Would there be a reduction of workload for Pat as you moved into using these services?
Oh, there could be some potential minor reduction, but it depends on how we use it. Obviously, if we threw everything at him, there would be a much higher workload, but I think it's something to be mutually beneficial to both.
Okay. Ms. Walker?
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to bring to Mr. Green's attention that the City Council received a letter on the 14th, so that would have been last week, yeah, with regard to the Child Development Center closing down. And I would hope that perhaps a copy of the letter could be provided to you so that you understand that it's now been elevated.
Well, that same letter, when they gave me a copy, and they gave the board a copy, and they gave you a copy, and the mayor a copy.
So you're fully aware of the concerns that they have with the short time frame and all of that?
Yeah, we've been working with them, and they have, actually the individuals involved have looked at, they've wanted to take that and start their own program. So I think their concern really, I wish they would have just come and voiced that to me before they wrote a letter to everyone, but their concern is making sure that they're able to put it in play in time. And certainly something that we're always willing to work with them on. So,
well, as a mom that had to face child care issues and disruptions, this is a huge deal for parents, but I'm sure you're mindful of the...
Well, we've been trying to give them ample time and way in advance notice. So it's been a year since we've been telling them this is going to happen. And then we sent them the notice, and then if they need more time, obviously we can work with them any way we need to.
Well, this was the line that caught me, Mr. Green. A few weeks ago, we received the devastating news that our children's preschool was closing. That was what was it?
Well, there was a letter sent out in August, I think, giving them notice that it would be closing in June, but we've been talking to the individuals there as well as some of the parties involved for the last year.
We'll be be looking to our rep on the hospital board to keep us advised of.
Yeah, I saw that as a, gee, if there's anything the city can do to hurry up our permitting process too, plea on their part. When I read it, I thought, well, why would they send this? Then I realized they're trying to get everybody on the hurry up mode and make sure that we can move forward.
Right there.
So we'll do that. We're trying to assist them and help them in moving it there. When we made that consideration, the consideration was, are there resources in the community that could do the same thing? And then when they voice the interest in setting it up themselves, even better. So then you have another entity in the community that can provide that. And so if we can assist them, then we'll be moving forward with that in the board.
Remind me, Mr. Green, if you would, please, your next board meeting is scheduled for...
It's next Monday, next Tuesday,
next
a week from
Tuesday,
tonight.
A week from, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Mayor, before you move this,
Sure.
while this is, you have Mr. Green up there, I received the same letter also, and I've also forwarded a copy to Mr. Green. I also spoke with the author of the letter today, and she appreciated our interest. She wanted to just make sure everyone knew what was happening. That's why she made so many copies of that, and they're working diligently toward it. She did indicate that the hospital said, well, they're going to be storing that equipment, so there's more time than just January. While things are getting going. So there's a plan that the hospital was already working and had already communicated to them. There was actually more time for them to address the issues of furniture and equipment. Am I correct on that, Mr. Green? Just that, and she shared that. They want to make sure everyone knew what was happening.
They were just attempting to put a time frame on it because they've talked about it for a long time. All things are flexible when it comes to children. Thank you.
thank you, sir. I have an oversight. I apologize to the firefighters in the back of the room. We're going to continue this item, I thought. Yes, it's a continuance. So there's no, okay. Mr. Jackson had asked for a point of order. This item was going to be continued till our first meeting in, our second meeting in October. First meeting in October.
I think we can make the first meeting of October, and if there's a change, we'll let you know if there's something that comes up.
But currently it's scheduled for the first meeting in October. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Now we can move forward. Mr. Reel, do you have some news you'd like to share with us? And let me apologize for the oversight.
Mayor Sanders, members of the council, recently we conducted promotional training for the position of fire captain. It was very well attended and participated in. We had approximately 9 candidates to begin with. They were first assessed for their qualifications to take the test. Then they had a written element, a manipulative scenario element, and 2 interview processes that they had to pass in order to be considered for promotion. As of the results of that test, we netted a total of 6 captain positions that are not 6 candidates that are eligible for promotion for the next year. However, Andrew Miller was the top candidate. He was obviously very well prepared for the exam and did very well in it. So I'd like to present you our newest captain, Andrew Miller.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm going to do my best out there to help the city and our fire department and become a better department than where we're at with any type of extra training and any movement forward within the fire service that our chief deems necessary. And I think I'm going to do a great job for both the department, the city, and the citizens of our city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
He's got his cheering squad here. Gentlemen, it's good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us. We're ready now for item number 11. Is an individual present, Mr. Duran? Is the individual from Time Warner present? Kathy, okay. It's discussion and any necessary action regarding the transition away from a franchise agreement between the city and Time Warner Cable to franchise issued to Time Warner Cable by the state CPUC. Thank you. Kathy Jacobs.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Kathy Jacobs. I'm Director of Government Relations with Time Warner Cable. And I met with the city manager a while back and presented the information to him concerning what happens when a city transitions over to the state-issued franchise. So I'm here simply to provide you with some information concerning that. It's really basically business as usual for us. We continue to operate in your city just as we do today. We'll continue to grow our business and provide service to your businesses and to your community members. And we also will continue to provide the city with the franchise fees that you're accustomed to receiving, and they come directly to the city. They don't pass through the CPUC in any regard. The CPUC administers the franchise is all. So that's a benefit that you'll still continue to receive. We also continue to provide the free service to the schools, the public library, to the police and the fire departments that we do now, the free video outlets that we provide to those agencies. And we'll continue to just conduct business here. We have our an office here that will continue to be here as well. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Jacobs?
For Mr. Duran, I'm assuming that both the city manager and city attorney's office have taken a look at our franchise agreement with Time Warner. Are there any implications for the city, good, bad, or indifferent, with regard to our agreement?
No, and there is, yes, we did look at this, and we've looked at it over the years. When the state law was changed about 5 years ago? 4 years ago? 2 years ago.
2006 is when the law was passed. In 2007 is when it became
right.
effective.
And a number of, we've also I've met with the other cities as their franchises have expired. We've observed actually the lack of a change in the relationship. For example, the any comments or questions or complaints that come from the public can still come here, and we forward them on to Time Warner. That relationship does not change. The franchise fee does not change. What changes is the authority on there's no renewal. Normally it would be a renewal of a franchise right now, but when that law was changed in 2006, it was a matter of timing out. I believe the county's franchise ended about 3 years ago. Does that sound about right?
No, actually the county, Imperial County's just expired this year as well.
This year?
So, yeah.
So we've been watching them expire, and also up in Calipat, which is a different company. So we've been watching these expirations occurring, and I think they'll be occurring for another couple of years.
Actually here, for Time Warner Cable here in Imperial County, we will be experiencing these expirations until May. Calexico is the last one, and that's in May of next year. And then all of the cities that are under, or the county, which were under a franchise agreement with Time Warner Cable, will then all be state issued. And that's occurring statewide, not only with Time Warner Cable, but with other cable providers, other video providers throughout the state are experiencing the same thing. So it's just a common occurrence, and it's just, as you said, it's very seamless. It's just a transition that the communities go through, and I hope it's not impactful to the city in any regard, because we're still there as your video customer provider. And so we're still there as a contact for you.
Is there any additional questions for Ms. Jacobs?
Yes, I want to thank Time Warner. When this came up, I asked if she would give this presentation prior to the transition. So should you get phone calls, it doesn't change the channels. It doesn't. It changes where the the authoritative document resides.
We'll continue to provide notice to the city whenever there's a channel change, just as we do now. And so you'll still continue to get those notices. Obviously, our business continues to evolve and change. And we will continue to upgrade our services that we provide to the residents here and businesses here in this community, just as we do in our other communities. So you'll see the advanced technologies roll out here just as they have in the past. There'll be no change in that regard whatsoever.
We trust that there'll be some improvement, though.
We're hoping as well.
Yes, because
exactly.
what I'm hearing from certain residents is that they're not quite sure when you choose to scramble the channels. They're not sure why they get the black or the blackout and what that means, and where do they go to get help for that, and how the channels have moved from one to the other. And So the ones that are notifying me seems befuddled at best, confused, and disappointed. So what would you suggest? Should I just say to them, please call Kathy Jacobs. She has all the answers for you.
I'll be glad to provide you. I'll send you. You have an email address,
Yes.
and I'll leave my business card here as well,
Sure, okay.
so that you can refer those to me, especially by email. That's actually the easiest way to reach me because I'm about quite a bit, and I will be happy to answer those any questions that are of that nature. I'd be very happy to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. I think that may have stimulated some
Yes,
additional
indeed,
questions.
because,
Ms. Walker?
The complaints I receive most frequently are with the rate increases that seem to occur with great regularity, and not just a little bit here or there, but seem to be kind of substantial on a year-over-year basis. So would those inquiries go to you as well?
Well, certainly those can be referred to me. Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Just, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just always makes me a little curious when I hear about something that on the surface it looks like a significant change, but on the other hand, I'm hearing that it's basically status quo as it relates to the actual operation. So someone must have thought sometime back that this would be a good idea, and I'm wondering if you tell me what it is. And second, with the change in the actual parties to the agreement, if I'm using the right terminology, and keeping the status quo in terms of the franchise agreement fees and all those kinds of things, would that remain in perpetuity, or not? It would remain for a while, or is there a risk or probability that may change in the future?
The state-issued franchise lasts for a year. It was initially issued in January of 2008, and the franchise, the agreement currently expires in January, or in 2018 then. And there are some things that likely will be changed in the law. As you know, when a law is enacted, many times there are things that are not foreseen at that time, and so there likely will be some changes in the state law. AB 2987 was the law that was passed and then enacted as the Digital Infrastructure Video Competition Act, commonly known as DIVCA. And so the current law that we operate under will likely change, but it will change probably to the benefit of the communities, because communities are involved in the dialogue just as they were initially. The state franchising law came into being when Verizon and AT&T began providing video service. And so when they realized they would have to go to every single community to get a franchise agreement, and they realized what a monumental task that was going to be for them, they went to the state legislature and got an advocate to come on board and start developing this state franchising law. And so that's how it came into being, is because competition came into the marketplace, which is why it's called the Video Competition Act. Because what it has allowed is it allowed Verizon and AT&T to start providing their video services wherever they applied for, and that's all anyone has to do. Any company just applies for a video franchise. You provide an indication of the census tract areas where you want to serve, provide your service, and then the CPUC says, okay, you have the financial backing, this is where you want to serve, okay. And that's the process. So it's vastly different than the negotiations that we previously would have gone through with the city to negotiate a franchise, because the state law provides the framework that everybody applies for and abides by that same law. It has brought consistency across the board for all providers, so that regardless of whether we're providing service in El Centro or Los Angeles, the law is the same and the rules of engagement are the same in that community. So the community still has the obligation or the responsibility for receiving those complaints from our customers, your residents. That remains here as it is in every community that's under the state-issued franchise. So while there are some changes, there actually are not many changes. And that's been beneficial, I think, for all, because it's rather seamless when it occurs. So there isn't a lot of disruption to any of the way of doing business at all. You still talk to Time Warner Cable. I'm still your representative for this area, and will continue to be, hopefully, for a while. I've been with the company for 18 years, but I am new to your area, but I've actually been in Palm Desert for 18 years, servicing that area and Barstow and 29 Palms. So I have a long history with the company, just new to Imperial County.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Jacobs? Thank you very much for the explanation.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We're moving on to item number 12, discussion and any necessary action regarding the duties of the city treasurer. Mr. Duran, you're going to make the presentation?
Yes, thank you. Before you, as you recall, in November of last year, I was appointed as the city treasurer as part of the charter change that occurred when we eliminating the elected position. Well, through the process of reviewing not only our own ordinances and policies, but also our other agencies, the RDA at that time was around, and also the hospital, the El Centro Regional Medical Center. And in that process, for all the years we've been doing this, there were some requirements associated with the treasurer's office in those other agencies that were not being affected in a proper manner. And part of that is such as cash handling, investments. So after some review of that, my recommendation is that the city council authorize the appointment of deputies, and one would be within the city, and one within the other agency that's left here now is the ECRMAC, is responsible for that, because otherwise it's not an effective process. For example, the bylaws of the hospital require that the treasurer assure that deposits are made on a daily basis. Well, that's a very difficult process for me to assure. Now, I can talk to the CFO, and by the way, that does happen, but within the bylaws, it calls for that. And rather than modifying bylaws, I believe the better way to do it is forming by having the deputies, and those deputies would make reports to the treasurer's office saying, yes, we are in conformance with all of the policies of the city, because all the treasurer function is to assure that all the agencies are following the policies of the council when it relates to investments and cash handling. And I think this would take care of that and allow for a more consistent and assured manner to follow those rules and policies. And this was done in conjunction with both the CFO and the finance director, and I think that we found a gap in our processes that we're going to fill.
Are there any
implementation of an effective internal control structure with regard to the investments? And so I would move for approval, Madam Mayor.
Okay, of the ordinance and then the resolution, Ms. Walker?
Ordinance number 12-09, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of El Centro amending Section 2-10 to Article 1 of Chapter 2 of the City Code relating to the duties of the City Treasurer, waive first reading and pass as a first reading.
Second.
Moved by Walker, second by Silva. Ballot, please.
That motion carries 4-0.
I then, Madam Mayor, would move approval of resolution number
124.
resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro confirming the appointment of deputy city treasurers.
Second.
Moved by Walker, second by Silva. Ballot, please. I'm sorry.
That motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. We are now prepared for item number 13, discussion and any necessary action regarding the award of an El Centro Regional Bus Terminal Station project to Hazardous Construction in the amount of $3 million, $3,646,000, and then waive the bid irregularities and assign a construction contingency of $365,000 for a total project value of $4 million plus. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. This is a site plan view down at 7th and State. the northeast corner will be completely renovated. And you can see there's parking for 8 buses in the traffic pattern. And it's set up for 4 large buses and 4 small buses. As background, the design was awarded to SOMAS back in 2009, and we had an opportunity to get additional ERA funding, and so during that period waiting for to find out if we had the funds or not, it took a little time, but in June of 2011 we increased the design scope with SOMAS, and we went out to bid May 1st, 2012, and bid opening was August 30th. I want to note that between May 1st and today, it's 4.5 months. So that's the period between a out for bid and a bid award. As background, we had 4 bidders. Hazard is the low bidder. The lowest 3 bidders did not submit all requested documents. The lowest 2 bidders submitted missing documents after the bid opening. The second low bidder submitted a bid protest claiming unfair bidding advantages to Hazard Construction, the low bidder. Their claim was based on failure to list the DBE subcontractor on the DBE form. Our city attorney reviewed the claim and concluded no advantage was given. The low bidder had been listed as the DBE along with the amount of the contract under the subcontractor listing form. The missing documents did not provide a bidding advantage. The project is partially funded by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the $1.2 million. This funding must be utilized by September 30th, 2013 or lost. Rebidding results in a re-advertising, re-qualifying bidders going back to the award, and it would take about 4.5 months additional time. Rebidding would result in construction postponement to probably February 2013 and increase the risk of not expending all the ERA funding on time. The schedule, if we award the contract tonight, would be begin construction approximately October 22nd. It's a 10-month contract, and would complete construction in September 2013. We anticipate returning to council with the construction management contract in the second meeting in October. Staff recommends the award of the contract to Hazard Construction with a 10% contingency. Any questions?
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hagan at this time?
I do have a question for our city attorney. Ms. Becker, in the protest letter filed by the second low bid, they talk about HCC gaining an unfair advantage over other bidders by this failure to complete the DBE form. Can you explain why you consider that to be an immaterial variance from the bid response?
It's considered, I determined that it was immaterial for 2 reasons. Number one, if you look at their subcontractor listing, Hazard had locked in their DBE in advance of turning in the contract, so the numbers were set. It wasn't as though, as alleged in the letter from TB Pennick & Sons, that they would be able to go out and shop around after the bid was awarded to them. In addition, they, when they turned in the forms the following day, when Hazard turned in the forms the following day, it confirmed that while they didn't meet the DBE goal of 7.5%, they only had 7%, they did make a good faith effort. And accordingly, we can waive that extra 0.5%. So it's my opinion, based on when they locked in the DBE and for what percentage, that is an immaterial. It did not give Hazard any kind of advantage not afforded to the other bidders.
And then the Exhibit A, and this is very helpful, Mr. Hagan, thank you. Exhibit A that talks about the other required documents that were missing from the packet as originally submitted, I guess. Could you comment, please, on the other two documents that are noted as being missing for Exhibit A?
I'm not sure I understand.
One being the bid agreement and the workers' comp certificate.
The bid agreement, and Mr. Hagan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the bid agreement was just the signature page that said that they would, that said that they would keep the offer open.
Let's have Mr. Hagan explain that so that you can be brought up to speed on this. Mr. Hagan, are you able to speak to that issue that Mrs. Walker has asked the question about? This will give the city attorney who just arrived 5 minutes ago a chance to be brought up to speed on that as a refresher for her.
When we attached those, I don't recall exactly the format of that form. I think you're right, though.
I think it was just the bid agreement itself. I don't think that's the contract. It's just the confirmation from the bidder that they will keep the bid open, that this is their bid and that they will keep the bid open, and we did receive that the following day.
And ultimately, we received the workers' comp certificate as well?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for either Ms. Becker or Mr. Hagan?
Not right now.
Not right now, okay. I think I have someone wishing to speak to this issue. Where is it? At least I thought I had a slip. I see a 15, 15, 16, 15. Was there anyone in the audience that wished to speak to this issue? No one. All right. Well, what's the pleasure of council, given the staff's explanation of this, what appears to be their rationale for the discrepancy and how those discrepancies were dealt with, which felt by staff, especially our city attorney, that this did in any way show any favoritism to one bidder over the other, that the documents are intact. What's the pleasure of the body?
I have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Walker?
Was your analysis then provided, excuse me, to the protesting company?
Mr. Campos asked me if we could share that with them, and I said absolutely he could. And I don't know if he did. He never followed up. Mr. Campos never followed up and told me.
I'm not sure if he did or not.
Okay, and do we have representatives from the other company, TB Pennick and Sons, present?
No one can.
Do we have any indication that they'd be willing to, or have decided to walk away from a bid protest? We don't know.
Don't know.
Okay.
Obviously, the concern is the money has to be spent by a year from now.
Yes.
And a bid protest would seriously just derail the timing of this project. Do we have any information as to whether or not they're going to walk away from the bid protest?
I have not heard from them. However, they were told that their time to come and speak to the council to address their, to elaborate upon this letter was today.
This is their administrative relief.
Did Mr. Campos in any way share any information with you before tonight?
No, he's on leave, and he did not.
Mr. Jackson?
I just say, in the absence of any representation from the company that's filed the protest, I would move for approval of Resolution 12-10.
125.
Or 125. Resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro awarding the bid and authorizing the execution of contract for the El Centro Regional Bus Transfer Terminal Project.
Second.
Moved by Jackson, second by Silva. Ballot, please.
The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Hagan, you've shared with Hazard how much the city council hates to receive change orders with any of this project, right? That information has been
Yes, they
shared.
are in the audience if you'd
And
like to.
that contingency is really only to be used in the event that you discover something extraordinary, like hit oil or something that's going to be to our benefit.
Underground tank, something like that.
No,
Underground tank
Oil
if
tank.
it's filled with gold. Otherwise, no.
There are no additional questions or comments regarding that previous item that we, okay. Then move forward with item number 14, A discussion and any necessary action regarding the award of the SR 86 and I-8 landscape beautification project. Mr. Hagan, please.
Thank you. Here's some artist renderings of the end result of this project when it's finished. This is looking north at I-8 on Highway 86, and this photograph here at the bottom here is actually looking northeast, this area here. Now, I don't believe you've seen this since we went out to bid. We've added the north side here, and although there's no little green trees over here, they will be. They're not shown in this drawing here, but they're on both sides. It's a very steep slope in there, so they have fewer trees than than on the south side. So we're beautifying all four quadrants. Total project cost is made up of construction, $475,000, a contingency of $71,000, for a total of $547,044. Construction management, which will be back in the first meeting in November, will be $74,956 for a grand total of $622,000. There's no impact to the general fund. We have to have, these are TIA funds with a matching LTA funds of $71,000 from the city. Bid opening results, we had two bidders. Low bidder S&B Engineering, $475,690. Schedule is notice to proceed end of October and completion by February 15th. Staff recommends awarding to S&B Engineering with a contingency of $71,354. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Hagan regarding this item number?
I'm not familiar with S&B Engineering. Where are they located and have they done similar projects?
When we went out to bid, we realized there weren't any local contractors that would go for this. So we got with Caltrans and we got a list of bidders, and S&B Construction is a bidder right up here, and the second low bidder is down here, Pacific. And so these are contractors that do this type of work all the time for Caltrans. So they are experienced in doing this and completing these projects on time and on budget.
Did we call any references?
I'm not sure if Abraham did that or not, but Caltrans gave him a good reference.
You have a question, Mr. Jackson?
No, I think it's important. I like the project, but I think it's very important that somehow through our social networking and everything that we utilize, that we make it very clear there's no general fund monies used for this project. Because I think we're all going to get those questions of why are we spending money on this instead of other things that are maybe more needed in the city. So whatever we can do from the city staff point to really promote that.
And I think Mr. Jackson follows our Facebook. We've talked about that repeatedly on this page of the folks. This is a state grant, and if we don't do the landscaping here, they'll do it in Orange County. So we have the opportunity. Some folks have asked, well, why aren't you spending this on schools? And I think you've seen our comments that Ms. Connor puts together on that is to address it. And we'll also update the photograph on our social networking site to show that it's both sides of the freeway and what the new cost is, which is substantially less, because we were showing the full grant amount before. But I think I want to thank Mr. Hagan for working with Caltrans, because we were concerned we were going to come up with zero on this, because the requirements to work in Caltrans right-of-ways are can be so difficult, challenging, that finding companies that are used to it, Caltrans helped us out on that and said, look, these are companies that do landscaping on our right-of-ways. But I think that's the biggest deterrent for local landscapers is to work on federal property. I mean, the state runs it, but that's a federal highway. And I think that's the challenge for local contractors in that area.
Yeah, I think Grace does an excellent job in answering those questions, because I've seen several of those questions myself, and so just probably continued effort on that.
We'll do that.
If there's nothing further, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Move to approve Resolution 12-126, resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro awarding the bid and authorizing the execution of contract for the IA and SR 86 ramp beautification project to S&B Engineering.
Moved by Jackson, second by Walker. Ballot, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
And also to speak to Mr. Jackson's concern about making sure we disseminate the information, tomorrow morning during the presentation for the radio station, I will acknowledge that this is the funding streams for this project. Okay, we're ready for the item 15. Discussion and any necessary action regarding, discussion and any necessary action adding Division 11 to Article 4, Chapter 2 of the Code of the City of El Centro, establishing a local vendor preference program and exceptions thereto. Presentation will be made by Mrs. Piedra.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. The item before you is consideration of an ordinance to establish a local vendor preference program. As you may recall, we have received comments from our local based businesses. Also, you heard several months ago a presentation by Mr. Paul McManus from the Imperial Valley Business Alliance organization encouraging the city to consider establishing a local vendor preference ordinance or program. We also had the opportunity to participate with two members of the City Council. Actually, our mayor, Sanders, participated, and also Councilmember Solomon, in discussions in establishing a program that would encourage local businesses to submit bids and proposals to our city. And as you have seen in your agenda, we actually have two separate ordinances as we're treating public work and the procurement of goods and services under separate ordinances. It's important to keep in mind with this program that, and this ordinance we're presenting to you, that this ordinance applies only when our city is procuring goods and services in relation to this ordinance that I'm going to presenting to you with funds that are locally generated. This excludes any kind of state or federal grant, as we are required to follow a different procurement process for those types of goods and services that are being paid for with state or federal grants. In essence, what the ordinance does is it basically gives a 10% bid discount for eligible local business enterprises bidding for contracts to provide goods and services to the city, with the maximum allowable bid discount of $10,000. The main issues to consider in this particular ordinance as it relates to the definition of local business enterprise is that it means a business that has both a principal place of business in the city of El Centro, that has been in operation for no less than 12 consecutive months, and that has a valid City of El Centro business license. The other important element of it is that their principal place of business means a location where a business maintains a physical office and through which it obtains no less than 50% of its gross annual receipts. So in looking at the definition of what particular business would apply, it's important to keep these definitions in mind. Again, the essence of this local preference vendor program is to provide a discount to our local businesses when they are submitting bids to our city. We also did look at other local vendor preference from other cities to determine the ranges, and usually what we saw is that the discount ranged from 1% up to 10%. So there was a range there, so we're consistent with what we're seeing with other cities. If you have any questions at this time regarding this ordinance, I would be happy to answer.
I'm sorry. I think that Mr. Jackson has asked a question of the city attorney, so I'm sorry, Mrs. Piedra, but maybe we'll just pause for a moment and allow them to confer regarding this issue. And then we will get back to the questions, and I will certainly, those slips that I do have, I will be calling on each one of you in just a few moments, please. I do have three. I have 3 slips. see here. I don't know if there's anyone else in the audience other than Mr. Acosta, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. McManus. Is there anyone else in the audience who wish to speak to this issue? Okay. Seeing no one bring a slip forward, then. Okay, Mrs. Pedra, is there more that you, for your report, that you would like to add? Or is
No,
that
there's no
completed your
additional
report? Okay. Is there any questions from Ms. Pedra at this time? Mr. Silva?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Ms. Pedra, you said you looked at this ordinance as, you looked at other models to draft our ordinance. And so when you looked at that, or even when you had communications with other cities that have similar ordinances, did you get a sense that this in fact achieves the ultimate objective, which is to promote our local vendors, our local economy?
They use it, but the main issue is that in most cases, when we're procuring goods and services, we are using other funding sources, which basically, in essence, take out the ability of the city to provide this program to them. So in certain cases, it was really minimal use of this type of ordinance. Only in very unique circumstances. I think even when we were trying to apply it to the possible use here with our city, it's really very limited where you would be able to use this program. It is obviously an opportunity for our local businesses. There's instances where the proposals that we get are very close, and they're usually within the $10,000 difference. And so that gives it at least an ability for our city, for this council, to award it to a local bidder when you have maybe an outside company that's submitting a bid, but yet the qualifications and the ability to provide the same service are in essence the same.
So you do foresee projects that would fall within this umbrella to open, but you foresee that they will be limited in number?
It's our assumption that probably it is going to be limited, again, because you only have the ability to use this program with locally generated revenue, which would be basically our sales taxes that are generated in our community.
Yeah, for clarification, because I know this council has looked at this so many times, is anytime we mix the state, federal dollars, RDA dollars that are still floating around, then we can't use this because they prohibit that under the public contracting rules. So this is why there's some limited opportunities, but those where we would still like to have those limited opportunities when possible.
But in addition to that, to what's been stated by Mrs. Pedra as well as the city manager, we consider local to be countywide.
Not for purposes
in
of
this item, it's
no. This one is city, but in the I'm looking at the wrong one. The next one coming up.
The next
one is county. Thank you.
At the League of California Cities conference last week, they actually had a specific segment on local bidding and preferences. And you're right, Ms. Piedra, they are all across the board. And I didn't hear a lot of the speakers say that the ordinance has necessarily changed a lot of the perceived problem. And so what they did say, though, is it's led to a lot more work for the city staff because you have to do things like verify that they are, in fact, meet your definition of local. I think for purposes of this, there's a requirement that a certain percentage, or is it the next? No, it's this one. Certain percentage of their gross annual receipts come from principal place of business means a location where a business maintains a physical office and through which it obtains no less than 50% of its gross annual receipts. So who within your staff has the time, or within our finance department has the time to verify and validate that in fact a business is receiving 50% of its annual income from these sources, or that they've been in business for 12 months? And I mean, these are some of the additional burdens that are going to be coming to your department for finance. Correct. So we've thought through that.
Having worked with Ms. Pedro and the task force on this, is part of the procedural part that will come out of this once this is passed, is first there has to be there has to be a request from that business that they said, you know what, we want this percentage in their bidding process, and they want that 10%. They will need to bring forward that validation that, yes, we do 50%, we have this local office, and they're going to set it forward. It is not automatic. They would ask for that, because some businesses may not wish to provide that information. Because again, some of this is proprietary information. So again, we looked at the number of different ordinances out there, and some are so convoluted, no one goes near them. The San Jose one is so difficult to use, no one uses it, because the business say it's just not worth it. But I think this part is, we call that, in the process, in the procedural aspect of this, the business is going to say, yes, I'm willing to give you this information. So it's not a matter of they get it automatically, and then they say, okay, well now we're going to hold up everything, you need to give us all this data. In the bid process, they'll be notified. If you wish to avail yourself of this opportunity, we're going to need this validation. And that process, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Another city we looked at required CPAs. You know what, if we're going to do that, then we've made the thing so costly, because most small businesses don't hire CPAs, they hire accountants and other things. So we looked at trying to keep this as simple as possible, but also there will be some self-policing. For example, if an individual says, yes, I have all this here, it's as likely another bidder is going to say, no, you don't. And I'll prove it. So some of this part is the industry will police this also, we think. But we kept it down to just 2 items. We think it's about as simple as you can make it, outside of not having any validation at all.
Two things that are missing from our ordinance that I would have preferred to see. The city of Ventura has a small local business purchasing preference, and they actually have a penalty provision that says any person or business falsely claiming to be a local vendor under this section shall be ineligible to transact any business within the city for a period of not less than 3 months and not more than 24 months as determined in the sole discretion of blah, blah, blah. I think that if we have someone falsely claiming under our ordinance, I'd like to see a penalty added that says, you know, you give us the wrong numbers or something, and we are able to validate that you're going to get voted off the island for some period of time. That's number one. Number two, the other change that I would have liked to have seen in our ordinance is maybe an additional preference for businesses that are owned by minorities and or women or veterans. I know that there are other local bid preferences that go above and beyond, not just considered local, but also for those businesses that are truly considered disadvantaged in the marketplace because of some other challenge. And so I would like to see the ordinance come back with those 2 components.
A suggestion on the penalty side, and there was some discussion, not a lot. Then you've added another process, because then the individual has the right to petition the council to consider, no, I did not invalidate that, and you actually add more process to this. And the more process it is, a concern was the less likely a local business will want to participate. And that's why we looked at the penalty issues. Then we're going to have a an administrative process that allows an individual to, for us to say, you know, we believe you're not local, you didn't have 50% of your sales. Well, then we'll be right here at council with them presenting why they think they did, and we just add more process. So
why can't we build in an administrative process that doesn't come to council? It seems to me that somebody that takes unfair advantage of a program that we put in place that's supposed to be benefiting local businesses, if they're going to participate under false pretenses, then they need to be called on that and booted out of the program. I mean,
we don't have any businesses like that in our community now, do we?
Well, I think the big issue is the 50% is individuals may say, well, you're counting it differently than I'm counting it. We were trying to keep this really as simple as possible, because I think there's so few opportunities in that, and if an individual is falsifying the records, it's as likely another local business is going to call them out on that and bring it to our attention and says, look, they really are not a local business. But we can add that in. We were just looking at process, the administrative process associated with having a hearing and individuals saying, well, we think that you're going to be now booted out for 9 months. there's usually a hearing process that occurs. Even in our citation program, we have a separate board look at the citations. So we can certainly add to the process. I just want to caution you
Well,
may...
where within this is any kind of language that allows us to audit if we have a reasonable suspicion?
Fair.
Where is that?
to challenge it.
If we have a reasonable suspicion that they don't meet the
If they are,
standard.
if they're not who they say they are.
That we do not
I
have in
don't
there.
believe we have added that language, but I think we can.
If we could add.
Sure. I mean, we're looking for, if there is a simplicity process where we can, by our review, staff can reject their request for the 10%. Because the reason they need the 10% is because they're not the low bid. And if we,
all right, but
yeah.
it seems to me that upon reasonable notice, we should be able to have access to books, records, financial statements, whatever it takes to validate that they are in fact eligible.
Sure. And part of the process that we envision is we would ask businesses to pre-validate themselves. In other words, local business says, you know what, I want that certification in case something comes up, and we get the ones that want it done before the any bid process, so they're on record on that, they already have it. That's how we want to have it operate, but we're trying to keep down to as few. So again, we did look at having CPA audited statements, et cetera. Some cities require it. We think it would just kill off local businesses to do that because they'd have to go through more of the expense. But I do like the audit that we have the right to demand validation, that they could have to validate that, particularly if we don't recognize the company. Sometimes it's pretty easy, but when time's up, we have the right to require documentation that validates it. I like that. Thank you very much. That is a very straightforward. Then if they do agree with us, they'll come to council and say, you know what, we disagree with staff. All right, then let's get here. But I don't see that as the biggest hurdle. I think that the local businesses are going to be able to get to this pretty easy.
Okay.
And then my other proposed modification had to do with disadvantaged businesses that were owned by women, minorities, or veterans. Is that something that you've looked at and considered?
In the sample ones that we looked at, I didn't see that specific language. However, when we do state and federal grants, I mean, those are categories that we look at, so I don't foresee, unless from a legal perspective, that we could not add that, but I believe we probably can consider it.
And I'm not so sure what that would do. Are we talking about adding
an additional
another percentage, or adding the value of the local preference to businesses that fall?
Maybe we could do 8% for local and additional 2%.
Actually, let me offer you this, is that perhaps a different approach is leave it at your 10%, but raise your limit. In other words, 10,000, and if you're in the other categories, you can pick up, but you cannot pick up in all categories no more than another.
2% for.
Yeah, well, actually, we would actually do the dollar value.
Okay.
Is you get 10%, and you can go to you can go to $12,000.
Okay.
If you have the others. I mean, this way your percentages change, but you extend your cap out for those other groups. This way it's easier. The math is easier. And
I'm not sure if that's the essence of what we're trying to get here. We're trying to help all local businesses that are local. Right. I don't know that we're addressing. I think there's two different issues at play here. You're talking about minority-owned and women-owned, veteran-owned. I think that's separate from local. We're talking about local businesses, and I think
about the same thing. I'm talking about local businesses that are
women-owned, minority. And they would have a higher cap than just a straight, in other words, tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1 gets 10% and $10,000. Tier 2 is 10%, but the cap's a little higher. And I would suggest that this way you don't get into the percentages move so much. Because again, it has to do with, we're going to pay a little bit more because of this. So you lift by raising your cap. And by the way, I just do that as an extra 2. It could be 5. But that would be a recommended way, is to change the cap for those. And you could even you can provide a female minority veteran can get 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. And so if you have somebody come in with all the pieces, they get a little bit more of a cap on the 10%. Again, this is this is an infrequent situation that's going to occur because we have so many other dollars involved. But it is a way of addressing local vendor that has those other categories that they're also addressing locally here.
Are there any additional comments or questions, Mr. Silva?
If there's an interest in that.
I don't know if it's a question, but first of all, I want to thank the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem for their work. I know we've been talking about this for, seems like, since I came on the council 5 years ago, so it's good to see that we finally have something in front of us to discuss. I don't disagree with Ms. Walker, and I do think that the ideas of broadening the scope of the preference is not a bad idea. I think that as it relates to penalties for false information, whether the pre-validation would work, or maybe even contacting the city that you referenced, Ms. Walker, and finding out if what issues they observe as they implement that, and then kind of learning from them. I think that will be something that will be beneficial to us. So I don't object to the bringing this back and kind of massaging it a little bit more, but I do think that it's definitely a step in the right direction, even though the opportunities, as we have heard, for people to really take advantage of this will be limited. But nevertheless, one or two that may come to fruition where that makes a difference to the local vendor, I think is a wonderful idea.
Keep in mind, I do have several individuals who wish to speak to the issue. There may be a few that could add some more pieces or components that would be of interest to us. Sure.
Yeah. Just to disclose, since IVIBA is the principle behind the presentation that came to the council, I'd like to disclose that I was a founding member of the IVIBA, consulted with our city attorney, and found that there is no conflict for me to participate in this issue.
To elaborate on that, based on the facts as Mr. Jackson explained them to me, it does not appear that he has any of the qualifying types of economic interest that would create a conflict under the Political Reform Act.
Mrs. Feather, I do have several individuals who have acknowledged they would like to speak. Mr. Acosta, in the audience.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the time tonight. My name is Chris Acosta. My wife, Kathy, and I own and operate a local tow business, Premier Towing, that's located here in El Centro. I'm here before you tonight to show my support for an ordinance such as this. We do provide service for the city in various forms, whether it's towing of city vehicles to and from repair shops, more importantly, helping the police department through a contract we have with them for clearing of accidents, helping stranded motorists, storing of their vehicles. I'm not sure how our business falls under this, but I wanted to come tonight to at least open up some question about our services are rotated amongst other companies that aren't within El Centro, and again, I don't know how this ordinance would pertain to us, but I would like to see a new ordinance or another part of it that would give us a preference, because the way it stands now with 5 other companies on this rotation, there's only 2 of us that are here in the city. That means 60% of the tows are going outside of the city. I buy my fuel here, all my employees live here, and the more my trucks run, that's more fuel I can buy, more people I can hire. And I just hope that somehow this ordinance can roll over into my type of business or other services like my business. And I just wanted to voice that concern.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Acosta? Anyone? No. Thank you, sir. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Randy Taylor. I'm president of the El Centro Chamber. I'm here tonight to voice our support for this ordinance. We think it's a very necessary gift to a deserving gift to our businesses here in El Centro. I only ask that you consider increasing the amount of the discount. I know in today's economic times it probably seems irrelevant that the amount is sufficient enough, but as hopefully sales tax grows, the city's funds grow, that they'll be looking at larger projects, and by increasing the discount amount, not the percentage, but the total amount, you thereby will be taking care of future needs. Any questions that I might assist with?
Just want to share with Mr. Taylor one of the observations at the League of California Cities last week when they were talking about the bid preferences. The huge challenge for most city councils when we're considering ordinance changes like this is balancing the taxpayer dollar with the local preference, because every dollar that we pay over and above the low bid is a dollar that's not in general fund any longer for the next new project. So it's really kind of a balancing act, and I think that Ms. Piedra has already stated that based on the survey throughout the state, we're actually at the highest end of the spectrum.
I did hear, thank you. I did hear say that for the percentages. I didn't know if that was also the case for the total discount. But thank you very much.
Mr. Taylor, I noticed that before you leave the vote, I noticed that you had put 15 and 16. We'll call you back up for item 16.
That'll be fine. I'll just be here to voice my support again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. McManus, did you wish to come? Mr. McManus, and then, okay. He's...
Good evening. My name is Paul McManus. I'm the CEO of Office Supply Company. I'm also the president of the Imperial Valley Independent Business Administration, or Alliance. But tonight my comments will only be on behalf of my own company, Office Supply Company. Just for the record, we are a woman-owned business, so I'm okay with that. I very much appreciate Marcella and her team and the task force doing this. I think this is a very important, and I'm appreciative that you're bringing this up for discussion tonight. I had a couple questions and a couple observations. I think that even though the money is only from general funds and it's not necessarily applied towards other projects that are tied to state or federal funding, I think that perception-wise, I think it does send a very positive message. Local vendors love to gripe about city does this, city does that, but this right here, not only will it have a practical benefit for companies such as mine, but I think that just symbolically it does send a message that the city does care about its local businesses. So I think that that has huge PR points for the city. I'm a little bit confused by the language here in terms of a principal place of business, and I know I've spoken to a couple of different people and I've gotten different answers, so I would like to have this clarified. In the documentation, it defines it on page 1. It says principal place of business means a location where a business maintains a physical office and through which it obtains no less than 50% of its gross annual receipts. So my understanding of that is that the business essentially needs to be, it's headquartered inside El Centro, because more than likely a business in, say, in San Diego or Brawley is not going to meet that requirement. What I'm confused by is, take my business for example, Office Supply, here in downtown El Centro, and I was looking at our numbers, and our sales numbers are 100% roughly. We serve the Imperial Valley, including Brawley, Clexico, Imperial, Centro, but our sales inside of El Centro are 43%. So based on this language, does that mean 100% of those sales come from my place of business located here in El Centro? So I'm confused as to whether that language means that I qualify because 100% of my business flows through my business here in El Centro, or does that mean that my sales have to be 50% or more
short, huh?
in the city of El Centro?
I see what you
Because if that was the case, then a business like mine wouldn't qualify. So I think that definition needs to be clarified and possibly rethought if the latter is the case.
I think what we can do is look at where point of sale contract is. When you add your sales tax up, what sales tax do you use?
I believe we do it based
Everybody's
on,
checking their oh, there it is.
Oh,
I believe we do it based on where our customer is located.
okay. And you may want to look at your state statute, because you should be using not the place of where it's where the contract resides. You actually may want to look at your sales tax requirements, because then I would say then those sales are not inside the city if you're reporting them to the city of Brawley as if you were in business in Brawley, because it would be like selling, I don't know, I'm going to use another company, Staples, saying, well, we're going to report our sales tax to Brawley because Brawley bought some products from us. No, their point of sale is in the city of El Centro, which is where you're writing your contract. There's a case with Apple that went through that, where their sales are at their point of origin, not, they said, well, they're somewhere else. No, they're where you made your sale and where you're retaining that contract. So I mean, we do need to add some language on that. So unfortunately, we're looking for the companies that have their businesses here. And let's take an easier one. Someone else selling, I don't know, flowers, is that this is where they're selling the flowers, and this is the local business, as opposed to, like for example, we have some companies who are selling all over the valley, and they may have an office here. We're losing the focus on this ordinance on local. So I think we could have a challenge, and we certainly would like some more input from you, since you brought up a good point. Typically is when you have a retail operation, your retail sales are associated where your company is located, as opposed to in the city where they're at. That's kind of an unusual situation that I had not seen before, and you have to bear with me, having been an ex-sales tax auditor. It's that's unusual, but it may be the case that you're fine. But I think it's for this ordinance. I think we're looking at the sales. Otherwise, we'd be chasing sales from all over. We're looking at what are the sales reported here, and we do get sales tax numbers, for example, that we have internally. But it's one where we want that validation from yourself. So yeah, it makes it very difficult, and now I'm not sure how we would do that.
Well, I thought, if I may, Mr. Durant, when the committee was looking at this, we thought if they were here and their sales are generated here, regardless of them going to some community outside of the city, the sales were generated from here.
Yes, but Mr. McManus is indicating that he doesn't report those sales here.
I'm not positive.
Is that
my understanding is different, but I'm not positive.
Sure. Yeah, it's just typical. It's. I think you may find that you may be. I hate to tell a business owner that they may be incorrect about their business, but your accountants are probably reporting it to El Centro, just because it would be unusual. So we may not have an issue here, but I think we should need to talk about how we determine the 50% of sales.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. There's two additional questions. We have Mr. Jackson and then Mr. Silver.
And maybe I'm a little confused too, because when I read this, I can see where Mr. McManus has some confusion. When I read this, I felt that if you were a local business in El Centro, that was it. That's one qualification. Then when I read the 50%, I thought that was talking about a business maybe located, say, in Imperial, but did 50% of their work in the city of El Centro, and that was an alternative way of qualifying. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but that was how I interpreted it, because if you're a business in the city of El Centro, your sales tax is reported to the city of El Centro. It doesn't matter if you sell to Brawley or you sell to Colexico, your business licensing with the city of El Centro, your state equalization in tax paperwork is city of El Centro, so that would be where your revenue would flow through. So I thought the second item of principal place of business meant, I don't know, maybe a flower shop. Yeah, correct. Maybe a flower shop that's located in the city of Imperial but sells 50% of their goods to the city of El Centro that can prove that, then would put them in that local preference category.
Ms. Piedra, if I can...
that wasn't the intention?
That wasn't the
No,
intent.
is that... And let me give you the example of, and I'm going to go to your competitor, is Staples is located here. The question is, do we want to treat them as a local vendor? And part of this was, I don't think for what we're trying to do here, we want to add that advantage to a national corporation, because they have a license here. They meet the requirement of having their business, principal place of business is here. Well, the question is we'd like to see that a little more local than that. That's where the second item. And I think what some language would need to be in here is that, at least the task force intent was to have both. And we're not saying both. We need to indicate that you need to meet both requirements. And that narrows it to much more local businesses.
Oh, it wasn't the second. Mr. Silva, please.
Well, I do think that this section needs some clarification, because I was thinking along the lines of what Mr. Duran just said in terms of Staples, but not as broad as a national store, but maybe perhaps a local store. So, Marcela, if we have a business, a local corporation that has branches throughout Imperial Valley. There's a store in Calexico, El Centro, Brawley. So when you look at this 50% margin, and assuming that this fictitious business does more than 50% outside El Centro, but it's the same corporation, would that apply?
I think if I understood your example, though, you indicated that it was a business that had branch offices.
Right.
If you look at the definition, the business would have to have a presence. I mean, they would have to basically be located within the city of El Centro. So that's really the only way that where it applies. They would actually have a physical location. And I think, and I agree that we need to modify this language. It is unclear. I think what we were trying to capture with this 50% is, and I'll give you an example when we're procuring professional services. We have big companies that are not headquartered in the city of El Centro, but when they are awarded a contract, let's say for construction management services, they establish an office here in El Centro, and they're here, for a couple months, and we have seen that happen with some of our projects. But yet, obviously, the sales receipts are not there because we probably overall represent maybe 20%. I think that's what we were trying to capture here with this language in the ordinance. So we do need to clarify it, but I think that's what we were trying to do, is we were trying to not put ourselves in a position where we had a company come in and say, well, we are El Centro based. I mean, we do have a business license and we have a physical location. But yet their sales receipts really do not represent basically half of their business being generated from the city of El Centro. So I think that's what we were trying to do. Maybe the way that the ordinance was written maybe doesn't capture that, but in essence that's what we're trying to do, is that we're trying to make sure that we are working and providing this discount to companies that actually are in fact local businesses.
And not those that may come in on a temporary basis.
Exactly.
And that was one of the critical pieces that the task force really looked at, working with the staff. How do we differentiate between those who come in, as Mrs. Pedro just identified, from those like Mr. McManus? How do we differentiate? Mr. Jackson, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, Marcella, along the lines of what Efren's talking about, let's take Imperial Stores, for instance. I think that's a good example of what Ms. Schill was talking about. Headquartered in El Centro, store in El Centro, but also a store in Brawley and a store in Hopeville. And I don't know what their gross receipts are combined with Hopeville and Brawley, but let's say it's more than 50% of what they take in. Would that nullify them from being eligible? Because, that would in essence be branch offices, but they're all one business. I think there might be some issues there, and maybe 50% is too high.
And that's what I was going to come back and respond, that possibly then at that point we need to reconsider whether or not we want to see that 50% of sales generation being from El Centro based, or if we maybe want to broaden it and say countywide.
Well, and I think to speak to Mr. Duran's point, and I totally agree that you don't want to give that advantage to a corporation like Staples or Walmart or such. But if we made that number 30%, I mean, Staples doesn't do 30% of their corporate business in El Centro. Neither does Walmart, Costco, things like that. So if we're trying to limit the corporations, the real non-local companies, I don't think the percentage has to be 50%. 25%, 30%, I'm sure is plenty enough to get the point across that we're really trying to establish this ordinance for the truly local business. And whether they have multiple offices or multiple retail stores in El Centro, Broadway, Calexico, or such. The purpose is to spend taxpaying dollars locally in our city and hopefully stimulate the economy and produce more jobs. So if there's something we can look at, and I don't know what the percentages are. I think Palm Desert passed an ordinance, and they were, I think it was Palm Desert. I think they were pretty progressive in the Coachella Valley. I think they had one. I want to say it was like a 5 or 7.5%, but I don't know that they had a percentage based. But I understand the purpose of that, and I think it's good. I just don't know that we need to look at such a high percentage.
Okay.
The intent of the committee was to try to capture the independent proprietor, the independent, and not the corporate. And so what the discussion today has certainly helped a great deal, and I think Mr. Solomon and I will be very appreciative of the comments coming from the council and from the members of the public on how we might look at a way to fine-tune this till it really meets the needs, or it captures our intent and at the same time meets the needs. Mr. Silva, you had a question?
Just, I wanted to follow up on the question that was asked by Mr. Acosta. If we were to go out and solicit bids for towing services, would this fall under?
I can speak to that because I was actually not part of her study, and Chief McGinley is here to get more information. We looked at this and did not see this as workable for the reason is we dispatch for other cities. And the rotation is that because we rotate police and fire, and sometimes those towings are from also by the fire department, those cities may have their own desires. So by not having a preference process, and let's take the easy one, City of Imperial, which by the way most of those other towing companies are in, we dispatch for their police. And so we really saw that as problematic of us having to, well, wait a minute, is this an El Centro tow? Is this an Imperial? Well, we have different rotations. We would prefer not to bring that into that dispatch process. The dispatcher already has their hands full of who gets dispatched. So that's why we did not recommend adding towing in here, because it's from an operational side. We don't just dispatch for ourselves. And by the way, the dispatch process changes. We've also dispatched for other cities, so it's changed over the years, but City of Imperial we've always dispatched for. Chief McGinley, is that pretty much in a nutshell?
Yes.
Ms. Becker, you wish to add some clarification to this?
Yes, Palm Desert actually doesn't have a percentage in there.
I beg your pardon?
Palm Desert does not have a percentage in their ordinance. It says, in this chapter, local business means a vendor, contractor, or consultant who has a valid physical business address located within one of the 9 incorporated cities of the Coachella Valley or within an unincorporated area of Riverside County in the Coachella Valley within the boundaries of the Coachella Valley Association of Governments. At least 6 months prior to bid or proposal opening date from which the vendor, contractor, or consultant operates or performs business on a day-to-day basis and holds a valid business license by a jurisdiction located in the Coachella Valley.
Again, earlier
and their cap is 5%.
Okay.
It's not a 10% discount like we have, it's a 5% discount.
But in my opening statement, I misspoke and said I thought this was countywide. Ms. Walker astutely corrected me. So now we see some of the challenges we as a committee face when we were looking at these models in which to use as a template for ourselves. The comments we've heard over and over, everybody wanted something for El Centro. So in order to try to capture that intent, we narrowed it. And then at the same time, we found that there were other templates out there that had a broader approach as to the way they were going to address it. Ms. Walker?
I'm wondering, since this is going to be going back, it kind of sounds like it's going to be going back for some modifications. I know that there are a whole host of cities that have these types of ordinances. Perhaps we could find those that do contain a percentage of business receipts generated within the local jurisdiction, ask what was the thought process, why was that included, or for other jurisdictions that excluded a percentage, ask what was the dialogue, what was the reasoning that you elected not to put that in, and then come back with a recommendation based on best practice. I agree. I think that 50% is too high, maybe something closer to 30%, although we may come back and decide that something else based on what cities are experiencing would be considered a best practice. So I'm willing, based on the comments that have been received.
There's a few more that may wish to speak before we do that. I want to give everybody that's here that's filled out a slip at least an opportunity to come forward. Mr. Dubois, do you still wish to come forward? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you had.
Oh no,
you want more?
I
Please.
still had a minute or more on my time.
You have. We will provide you that additional time.
I'd like to say one thing, which is I applaud the intent, which is to apply this towards independent businesses who are the ones that can much more benefit from this kind of program. And of course, the devil's in the details, as we say. A couple of recommendations that I would suggest is that either it's applied county-wide, or you drop the 50% down to 10 to 25% in that range. I think both of those would take care of the scenarios such as Imperial Stores and other businesses and still meet the intent that you have with this ordinance. A couple other brief points. Along with Mr. Taylor, I do support an increase in that $10,000 level. I understand that you have to balance it, but then again, if this is supporting jobs in the area, I think that it does balance it. And so I would encourage you to look at that. And then finally, a company like mine would probably run into this maybe several times a year based on furniture projects and whatnot. And so I would definitely be interested in being certified, but it would be really a pain, if you would, if I had to, every time I sent a quote in, had to justify this. And so if there's some sort of certification process where we can, before any bid goes out, we certify, and then once we submit a quote or a bid, we can just say this is our pre-certification number. I think that'd be important.
Yeah, I think that could possibly be incorporated. I was thinking of maybe a certification if on an annual basis, perhaps, if things change over that period of time. I think that might be something that's workable, at least worth looking at, so we appreciate that. Any additional comments or okay. Do you have more you wish to add, Mr. McManus?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dubois, do you wish to come forward?
Thank you. Bill Dubois, 935 North Imperial Avenue. My business is an ideal model of the kind of business that could possibly benefit from this ordinance. I was prepared to tell you that I like it just the way it is. I compliment the council committee that worked on it. And I think you guys came up with a great compromise of all the interests. I see now that it's going to go back for some work, which is okay. But I would ask in the most sincere manner and with the deepest amount of respect and affection for Mrs. Walker, that you not apply any gender or racial identity politics to this ordinance. I've been in business 22 years, supplying all kinds of equipment to public safety organizations. I have never had a factory representative come to me and say, okay, here's the price list for our stuff, but you're white, and so you get a cheaper rate. And I've never had a factory representative come to me and say, well, here's our price list for these products, but you're a male, so here's our secret price list just for men, because we shaft it when we give it to the women. We charge them higher stuff, or we charge Pacific Islanders higher stuff than we do white people. And I see no reason, because when I compete with another uniform supplier, regardless of where they are, on a bid, I can't tell if they're owned by a woman or a minority or whatever. We compete on the price, on the value of the product, on the service we give, the delivery time we gave, and they're buying the products from the factory the same price I am. And if it's going to come back to racial and gender identity, what's your threshold going to be? If I claim Pacific Islander status, what percentage of Pacific Islander do I have to verify in my lineage to be a Pacific Islander to get that racial preference on the bid? And how are you going to prove that my great-grandmother wasn't a Pacific Islander? So I think, there's the Bakke case from my alma mater. Was one of the first cases that spoke towards the disadvantage of racial identity in doing these kinds of things. And I would ask you with the deepest respect and request to stay away from that from a bid preference. But I do appreciate what you're doing. I think the ordinance is a great step in the right direction.
We noticed that you were down for item 16. Can we just save this? You want to come back?
Yeah, I'll come back for 16.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dubois. So now someone wants to make a motion that we send this back for the modifications that were identified and ask staff to bring it back at what time frame? Committee will reconvene and go over it one more time.
Suggestion is,
what time?
we'd like to move the task force and then indicate to the council when we can bring this back, because we want to meet with the task force on this also.
Okay.
So rather than trying to set it for the second meeting of October, we won't make the next meeting. We'll shoot for quickly as possible. We need to schedule that task force meeting to go over this and get some of the other information.
Yeah. I would request it not be on the second, because I'll be representing the city for LAFCO.
Okay.
So what we would propose is to bring, it's not a continued item, we would just bring this back with work from the task force.
Okay.
We would re-agendize it, is what we would do.
Okay. Any comments regarding that? Perhaps then we could look to our first meeting in November, whenever this...
As quickly as we can.
Okay, as quickly as we can.
As quickly as we can get this thing turned around.
Mrs. Pedro, I noticed you were taking copious notes, so you captured all of the comments. Mr. Duran and Ms. Becker captured everything that was said, and certainly the comments coming from the public. So this item will be brought back as quick as possible. We're ready now with item 16, which in essence is another version, or a companion, if you will, a companion to the item 15, discussion and any necessary action adding Division 10 to Article 4, Chapter 2 of the Code of the City of El Centro, establishing a local business program for public works contracts and exceptions thereto. Mr. Hagan.
Thank you. This is very similar to the local vendor preference. This is local contractor preference. But instead of citywide, it would be countywide. We initially were going with zip codes, and we realized we didn't include all the zip codes, and plus zip codes change. New ones are created. So we specified within the county for 12 consecutive months. And we have the 50% gross annual receipts for the principal place of business within the county. And we added significant employee presence. 25% of the employees would have to be within the county in the business. And then, of course, they'd have to have a state contractor's license, be in good standing with the city, and have a El Centro business license. They would go through a sequence of providing a statement from their authorized representative stating that they meet all these requirements and complete an application. And it would be on record for 2 years within the city. And I thought it would be worthwhile just going through this. We have the same 10% or $10,000 max. I thought I did a couple examples here. So we'll go through this first example here. We have a San Diego contractor bidding. The bid came in, let's say, at $100,000, and we have an El Centro contractor, and the bid came in at $109,000. So the math that we would go through, we would take the 10% or maximum $10,000. In this case, the $10,000 is the maximum. We've reached the maximum there, and we would subtract that from their bid, and we would use the comparison here of the $100,000 to the $99,000, and the low bidder would be the local contractor. The actual contract price that we would pay would be $109,000. In another case where we have, let's say, two out-of-county contractors, a San Diego contractor and an LA contractor, the San Diego contractor, the doesn't have any subcontractors from El Centro, but the Los Angeles contractor does. And then we would look at the bid and how it's separated. This is the total bid prices. The San Diego one at 104, and then the Los Angeles one, he's got a subcontractor to 15,000, and his bid is at 90, so the total is 105. What we do is take 10% of this $15,000 or $1,500, subtract it from the total bid price, and there we have 103,500, and that would the local or the Los Angeles contractor where the local sub would be the low bidder, but the actual contract price that we'd pay would be $105,000. I just thought it was important to include those examples, how the math would work. Any questions?
Mr. Jackson, and then we'll go.
I love your second example, because in the case that we don't get a local contractor, this promotes or encourages them to local hire subcontractors. In the case of the first example, certainly a local contractor is going to hire they do most of their work with local contractors and local subs. So in that case, we're certainly benefiting from it. But the second component is something that I think is something that I previously didn't think about, and I'm glad that you brought it up. But I really like this component, and I think that it certainly encourages, in the event that we don't have a local contractor that bids, it encourages outside generals to work with our local subs. So I'm very supportive of that second component.
Thank you.
Mr. Silva, any question?
Terry, as it relates to the previous discussion and some of the items that we were discussing in terms of modifying it, did you hear any of those that you think would apply here?
Yes, the 50% requirement is here for the principal place of business, so if we adjust that percentage down, we could do it here as well.
Okay. I do have a question, and I don't know if it's Marcela or you can answer, but as it relates to the issue of minorities and women businesses, isn't there a definition that the feds use for someone to qualify under that? Can you share, I don't know if you can share, Marcela, what that is?
There's also a certification that the business
Usually what happens is, and again, it's part of that monitoring that as staff we would have to do in terms of validating whether or not, they're veteran and providing evidence of that. In the case of minority or woman-owned, it's an overall percentage of ownership that in the company. I mean, in certain cases with women-owned, they basically have to be the majority owner in that particular business in order to be able to qualify. So there are definitions.
What about in an extreme case, like Mr. Dubois mentioned, where someone may have, 10% Hispanic heritage, and would that person qualify as a minority-owned business? Or how does that play out?
These are self-identified.
It's usually a self-certification, and it's based on a percentage. I think what's important is what you pointed out, Councilmember Walker, about if we add in there that the fact that they have to be able to provide information that they can validate, and if they're falsely providing information to that effect, then there's going to be that impact and that penalty. But there are percentages that we can incorporate it if we decide to include that type of category in the ordinance. Then we would make sure that we identify those percentages that apply in the case of minority and women-owned businesses.
Well, personally, I still like the concept of adding this as a provision within our ordinance. I think that we're looking at providing what's the word that I'm looking for, an advantage to locally owned businesses, and as it relates to the cost and competing with other vendors, we are in essence providing local preference. So I think it's a good idea to extend that to minority owned businesses and women as well.
And just for clarification too, those are categories that we do, as a matter of fact, with state and federal grants, those are categories that we do outreach to. To give you another example, specifically with CDBG, which is a federal program, with public work contracts, we go as far as even doing Section 3 type of businesses or employees, which are basically, they have to fall under a certain income limit. So, I mean, we do capture
There
those
is
areas already.
mechanisms in place
There are, and we can certainly look at those.
So would you like to have that added into, if I'm hearing correctly, notwithstanding the comments we had to caution us for going in this direction, I hear from the council that there's an interest in pursuing this. So I would I'm sorry, Mr. Do you have a comment you want to make before I make my statement? Okay,
sure, yeah,
please do.
I appreciate that. I respectfully disagree. I'm with, my issue with this is that you want the best qualified company at the lowest bid, period. And what we're trying to establish here is a local preference for local businesses, or we're trying to encourage contractors that are local to either obtain the contract, or we're trying to encourage outside contractors to use our local subs. I don't know where minority, where women-owned, where veteran-owned, I don't know where all those things come to play. I realize there's a huge sensitivity level on these issues, but I sincerely believe that these are two different issues. We're trying to do something and establish an ordinance, and the entire purpose of this was to help our local businesses. Local businesses are local businesses, whether they're women-owned, minority-owned, whatever the case may be, they're still a local business. The title of this ordinance is local business. It doesn't say local business / minority / woman / gender, whatever the case may be. It's local business. And I think any business that qualifies, whatever stipulations we put forth, is what we should leave it at. And I think it complicates things. I think it might discourage some businesses from participating. If you have two businesses that are competing locally and you give some kind of extra advantage because one is a woman-owned and one is a male-owned, but yet they both buy the products and they still provide the services from the same places and the same vendors, I think that gets into an unfair advantage to other categories. And I would be against that. And I'm very supportive of both item 15 and 16, but I cannot support us deviating from what we are here for, and that is to provide some kind of local benefit to local businesses. And I'd hate to have to vote against something just because we somehow get off on a tangent and trying to incorporate other items into something. I think we have a very good policy. I love 16. I think 16 is something we could actually vote on today. 15, I agree that we need to massage it, clarify some language, and bring back. But I'd certainly encourage my colleagues to stay on point and work on what we have in front of us.
Okay. Is there any comments before I make a comment?
I will address Mr. Jackson's comments after I have clarification from Mr. Hagan with regard to one of the nuances in this item has to do with the total number of employees and validation of residency. How are we proposing to do that?
We would take the list of employees and their addresses, home addresses, and so we'd have the total list of employees. Let's say there was 100 employees. 25 of those employees need to live within the county.
Okay. Live, rent,
their home
own
address
for some period of time, or
it's a
for you.
That's where I think we start to get into some interesting questions with regard to residency. If we have a vendor or subcontractor that has a tendency to shift their employees from place to place following where the work is, as long as they have 25% who are then leasing within the city of El Centro or within the county during the period of time that the contract is in play, does that qualify, or 25% have to have been on the payroll for some period of time?
We specifically state that the principal place of business and the significant employee presence needs to be for 12 months, 12 consecutive months.
Per year.
that employee list, it needs to be employees that have been employed with that business for 12 previous months.
The employee section was where I was having...
Well, the bottom of the page 1, it covers the 12-month period.
Yeah. Well, that's, I guess I was having more difficulty at the top of page 2, Mr.
Right.
Hagan, where we talk about
And we
the
could repeat that
significant
12-month requirement
employee
there.
presence means no less than 25% of the business's total number of employees. And are we talking full-time, part-time? If I have 50 employees, but only 10 of them are employed part-time, or 10 of them are employed full-time, does that make a difference for purposes of your ordinance?
It's not specified here. I would
I don't think we had,
part-time and
during the
full-time.
committee time, we didn't consider a full-time, part-time category. I mean, it just came out as numbers.
With contracting,
Yes.
it varies. I mean,
Yes.
it's feast or famine.
That's a difficult, very difficult area to try to gauge.
I
and then
agree.
how do we, do we talk about FTS instead of employees? Do we, how do you confirm some of that information? Is it self-certification? I mean, I presume it would have to be self-certification.
Right.
That is,
It is.
it is.
What about companies that have employees that live in Mexicali and commute
Yeah.
to participate in the...
This is going to need some exploration.
I think so. I think we need a little more definition with regard to the workers whose primary residence is either within or outside of Imperial County.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whether we mean
Yes.
full-time equivalent, do we mean...
I would like to provide just a nuance to the struggle that we've had on this. And by the way, you notice we separated Public Works from vendor because we
Right.
had them all together.
Yeah.
And we realized you couldn't do this. We can also have the situation of a local vendor, local contractor, excuse me, that has no local subs, and we could have a San Diego contractor with a lot of local subs, and we've actually had this occur. And so under this scenario, the San Diego company could win the award because they've hired those subs, where the local company hired all San Diego subs. And we went through a scenario where we actually found that. It's unusual. You kind of scratch your head about it, but it had to do with trying to get the low bid. And sometimes they're going to other places to get that lowest bid. We've seen that people going to Yuma, et cetera. So it's what you're seeing here is a struggle through a number of different alternatives. That's why it's taken so long. And each city we've talked to, the ones that have rather elaborate schemes, no one participates in. So, well, that won't do us any good. So I want to share the frustration of the task force. If you speak for the
I was going to say, I have a deeper appreciation for the work that you did, Ms. Anderson.
So this started out as one project, then got split to two. Because we could
It's
not
been
fit
a
them
long
both in.
time coming, but I think Mr. Solomon would concur, and in his absence, I'm going to attempt to speak for him. This is a good first step. It's a good first step, and it's responding to the community who have raised the issue and time again. I think great accolades go to the staff as well for working so diligently and sitting with us as we made an attempt to come up with something. I think, Mr. Jackson, is there any more comments from the council? I just had a new slip come forward, and it's Mr. Josue Mercado.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Josue Mercado, also known me by Josh. I live here in the city of El Centro, 486 West Hamilton. And the reason why I'm asking for this opportunity to speak is actually to support the comments that were made by Mr. Dubois and Councilman Jackson in concerning to not adding to the ordinance anything that deals with being minority-owned or gender-owned or veteran status, because I believe that will actually dissuade some local businesses from even attempting to try to obtain the bid for a product or a contract and obtain it. let's make it simple. It's about local businesses. Now, of course, these local businesses will be employing local people, hopefully. I mean, that's the idea. When it comes to item number 16, I don't know who mentioned about making sure that the employees were working here in the city. Was it you, Councilman Walker?
I said, should we make,
Oh, okay.
I mean, we all know that there's a fair number of companies that employ folks that do not live within Carroll County that in fact cross daily from Mexicali to work.
And I wouldn't see a problem with anything like that, because that reminds me of kind of how the California enterprise zones, where one of the requirements to qualify for that California tax credit, it mentions that your employees that you hire, the majority of them need to be coming from this, either, well, right now here in Imperial County we have 2 zones, they need to come from an enterprise zone. So something like that can be attached to that component, so that way we want to ensure that the money, I mean this credit that is being allowed to them, is for the intent of having those contracts stay here in the city of El Centro, which means that the owners of those companies that once they receive those profits are actually going to reinvest it here in the city. I mean, they're going to shop here locally, they're going to hire locally, and of course, what happens with that? Well, if they hire locally, if they shop locally, well, that's going to help everybody as a whole, because it's going to elevate our tax base, and that's what we're trying to do, using that money and keeping it here within the city. Whereas if we hire anybody from outside, even though it might be a lowest bid, and you think, well, I'm doing a service to the taxpayers, in reality you're not, since that money is going out of the city of El Centro. So we're benefiting somebody else, and that's what we're trying to avoid here, and that's the importance of supporting those local businesses.
Let me add some pieces that the committee certainly struggled with. As we were looking at some of the things that we thought might come up, and certainly we appreciate all the input, when we tighten down some of the requirements, then it appears as though it might be the heavy hand of government trying to tell the business how to operate. So we were concerned about how much we could put in place to actually make this workable, doable, and at the same time embrace the entrepreneur, and with that entrepreneur spirit, and provide a venue for these individual businesses to actually benefit from this effort. So that was one of the things that we struggled with as well, as far as saying, are you going to get someone from Mexicali? Well, you know, Mexicali, if they have the green card, should they come and work? I don't know. We have many businesses that are employing individuals from Mexicali. Sometimes in the service sector, certainly in our hotel industry, sometimes in the professional sector, we have nurses that are coming from over there, and some doctors. So that was some of the concerns that we were trying to balance. But the input that's given to us today, I think, will help myself, Mr. Solomon, and certainly our staff in trying to find that balance and using some of the templates that have been identified from the other communities as to what we can do and how we can balance that.
I'm interested in the comment that you made, sir, with regard to people would be dissuaded, I believe is the word you used, from applying. If we included any consideration for disadvantaged businesses, I was wondering if you could explain why you feel that they would be dissuaded.
Well, it's just adding another component that will be a burden on them to now having to prove, like Mr. Dubois mentioned. It's like, well, okay, let's say if you're well, in the case of gender, it'll be easy. It's like, are you a guy or are you a woman? Well, it's easy to prove that you're a woman, or. But in the case of nationality, or not nationality, but ethnicity, we call that'll be rough. Like in my case, I can say, well, Mercado, I'm Mexican, but Mexican American descent. But who knows? Maybe that was my great grandfather that adopted, or great grandmother that married somebody from Mexico, and then they came over here, and all of a sudden, just the name stuck. So then, will that qualify me, or vice versa? Like in the case of Mitt Romney, we can say, well, his father was born in Mexico, so in a way, he's a quarter Mexican. That's a toughie. So that's where I think if we just focus just on the local, if you're a local business, you're encouraged to apply. Here we're giving you the special preference. It's easier for them to understand. Now, regarding what's addressing the minorities and genders, of course, if anybody wants to apply for a business, look for a business. I mean, there's a lot of grants and programs aimed at them to provide them to help that startup. I don't think the city needs to do a little bit of a boost to entice them to go into business, for example.
But why do we think those programs exist to begin with? Why do we think that state and federal governments or our educational institutions or a whole host of other options are put in place, opportunities are put in place to give a boost to the disadvantaged, whether they are veterans or people of color or women? If we were talking about a level playing field, to quote Mr. Jackson, this is meant to level the playing field. If we were starting with a level playing field, this wouldn't even be an issue. But the fact that we continue as a country to struggle with the fact that it is not a level playing field, that minority-owned businesses, that women-owned businesses, that businesses that are started by veterans face much more difficult challenges, have by probably most accounts have not been in business for as long, don't have the track record, and so they need that maybe additional little boost. So these programs are put in place in a whole lot of different arenas to address the very issue that we're talking about here. How do we level the playing field? We level the playing field by giving maybe just a little bit more consideration for a minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned business. And it's easy enough for us to get the criteria because those kinds of certifications are done all the time. So rather than just a blanket, no, don't consider it, I'm asking that the task force go back and consider in addition to one or both of these.
Mr. Jackson, would you like to make any comments or any points of clarification? Mr. Mercado, did you have any additional comments you'd like to make, or you want to? I don't know. Is your question for Mr. Mercado?
No, I was going to make a statement.
No. Other than thank you for going through the time and through the process, because that means that as a city council and as a city, it's not true, as Ms. McManus mentioned, the comments are made, oh, the city doesn't care about business. No, you're showing that you do care. Okay. You're finding a way to encourage business, and ultimately that's the end. Whether, as the points that were brought up, but the point is encouraging local businesses and having our taxpayer money stay here within the community and helping the community grow. And I thank you for your efforts, not just what you made so far, but what you'll continue to do.
Okay,
thank you for your
sir.
time.
Mr. Jackson.
I'll just simply say I've been part of a business for 15 years here in the city of El Centro and Imperial County. And in 15 years, I've lost bids, I've won bids. I've never had anybody come to me and say, well, here's your bid, and you're the low bid, or you're the best qualified vendor, or we know that you're going to provide the best service because of your reputation. But who owns your company? I've never had that. I've never had anybody say, do you have a woman own your business? Do you have a veteran? Do you have a minority? It's always been based on who provided the best service, the lowest price. And I don't know that in our situation, we're looking to promote local business. And the spirit of this ordinance was to promote local business. And I appreciate Mr. Mercado speaking on this and Mr. Dubois. The spirit of this ordinance is local business. It's not to convolute this ordinance into a lot of different segments, because there's a slippery slope. If you start giving extra bonus points for minority-owned, gender-owned, how about sexual preference? I mean, there's so many different categories that are out there that you've opened the door to somebody else coming in and saying, well, how about us, or how about this group, or how about that group? And I think we're really getting off on a tangent where we're getting away from the spirit of this ordinance, which was brought forth to promote local business. And I would just encourage the task force to stay on point. I think that they've done excellent work. I'm very impressed with the work out of the task force and city staff. I commend them for their work and their efforts. And I encourage them to stay on point and bring back an ordinance that I can support in a few months or a few weeks. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Hearing none. What's the pleasure of this item, which is before us now, item 16? Do we also want to make certain modifications? If I heard everyone correctly, you're relatively in agreement with this one. Or do you
I
want
think we're
to...
going to take this back and...
You want this to go back as well?
I thought there was some of the concepts that both have come up with this one here and also the previous one were similar and parallel.
Okay.
And it
All
was
right. So you want us to review them in totality as it relates to the two? In hearing the comments, the pros and the cons as it relates to preference for minority-owned businesses, I think, Mr. Duran, I will suggest that we view this as perhaps as some kind of overlay, and then look at what's been done in other communities. To my recollection, we found nothing that indicated this. However, there is 2 members of this council that would like us to give that into consideration. So I have no problem with looking at it with the committee and then coming back and with a more substantive concept as to what the outcome of our findings are, and then we'll be prepared, I think, more significantly prepared to go forward. Now, Mr. Hagan, did you add some more pieces you wanted to share with us tonight regarding
I
this?
took notes down.
Okay.
I think we need more clarity with regard to the employee piece of this.
Okay.
Yeah, and our city attorney is going to be looking, she commented on this back last summer. We're going to revisit her review having to do with some federal cases that could be problematic for this. But Mayor, please bear with me, I think a couple of individuals that come to the podium had asked to come back on 16.
I'm sorry.
That had asked to come back to the podium.
Yes, and I thought...
I wasn't sure if you had covered those.
Thank you very much. I had Mr. Mercado. I didn't have Mr. Dubois, and I didn't have Mr. Taylor. Would you gentlemen like to come back and talk about 16? Thank you, Mr. Duran. Mr.
I will
Taylor?
be brief in my comments. Again, the Chamber supports this endeavor. We think it's very important, and I'm glad that this is in the hands of the task force to work on and not the Chamber, because I see there's work to be done, and I wish you success. But the concept is appreciated by the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dubois?
Thank you for the opportunity to comment again. I have 2 comments on this discussion. The first is that I noticed that you carved out an exception for a project labor agreement, and I think that that exception should not be in there. The purpose of a PLA is to increase costs to the city, and the purpose of the ordinance is to decrease costs to the city. And so I don't think there should be any exception for a PLA. My other comment is a reiteration of the gender and racial identity politics that may become involved in this. This is not 1960. Bull Connor is not the police chief of El Centro with his police dogs and fire hoses. Thank God. Mr. Silva, look around you. I'm the minority here. If you go to the city of El Centro or the county of Imperial, and we're looking at racial makeup, I'm in the minority. When I can see in 1964 when somebody went to the bank, if it was a person who was not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, I could see the bank charging them more interest or denying them of a business loan. But does your bank do that now? I don't think so. Or when somebody applies to IVC in 1964, maybe the admissions officer let the white guy in, and if there was only one place left in class, and excluded the minority. But that's not the case now. Our society has made phenomenal gains in equality. And Mrs. Walker, you asked the question, why does the federal government still have these preferences? It's because of rent-seeking individuals. It's because politicians see an advantage to getting reelected that they can divide the country. into racial groups or ethnic groups or gender identity groups or sexual preference groups and convince those people that they are disadvantaged. But like I said before, us retailers, whether it's me or the minority female veteran across the street, if we're both selling holsters to the police department, the police department specifies a Safariland Model 070 Level 2 retention holster, we're buying them from the same manufacturer on the same price list. And I don't know how the racial or gender identity comes into that when it comes time for a bid. Because over the last 30 or 40 years, we've made such terrific progress in business loans or renting business facilities to somebody. I'm a landlord. I have 4 different businesses that rent space from me. I don't care what race the tenant is. I just want them to pay their bill on time. And if a business comes to me, I don't care who owns it. I'm not going to raise the rate because they're a minority or a woman or gay or whatever other kind of identity you want to give them. In business, I don't see the discrimination that you guys think that you need to correct with bid preferences. I don't see it when I conduct my business. And I think El Centro, among all cities, look at your council makeup. You can see that we're not fixated with race and gender identity in El Centro anymore. So I don't think the playing field is level, in my experience. I've been in business 22 years. So I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate you listening to my comments. Thank you for the work you did on the ordinance. It's a very big step in the right direction. And if the staff wanted me to participate in any advice, I'd be glad to do so. And I was thinking, for example, when you're trying to figure out how to do this employee thing, how do you decide that 25% of the employees? Call in a local contractor and ask them, hey, if this was a requirement, how would you prove it? Mm-hmm. And that way you could get, the advantage of some of our expertise. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dubois. I believe that the council was looking at those who spoke in favor of considering this particular component, was looking at a way to be inclusive, not exclusive. I also do not think it's intended to divide, but to make sure people are considered and included. This task force will take that into consideration, your comments as well as the ones from my 2 colleagues, because we think it's valid and important. We will go and look at what's out there and use the template. We'll bring back something that we will look at, and this council will make the ultimate decision. But I do appreciate your comments. Thank you, sir. Yes.
I do want to address, Mr. Dubois, if you don't mind. I appreciate your comments, and obviously I don't agree with everything that you said. Everyone knows that the majority of our community is made up of Hispanics. There's no denial or dispute over that, but I don't know, but I would suspect that if we look at businesses and who owns them, that may not necessarily be the case. And I don't want this to turn into a racial discussion. I don't think that's the intent from anybody here, but I think to make a statement that says that discrimination or doesn't happen, even in El Centro, I think it's a bit naive to make that statement. I think that there are issues. I do appreciate the analogy made by Ms. Walker in terms of level playing field, because I was going to make the same kind of observation. So I don't necessarily agree with everything that you just said, and I wanted to make sure that you heard that from me.
This item, Mr. Dubois, we thank you very much. And this item, along with the previous one, will be coming back. So Mr. Solomon and I know that the council punted. Thank you very much. And we will have work to do. But I think based upon all of the comments that we've heard tonight, from those who were presenters as well as the members of the council itself, comments from the staff on how we might be able to look at this and incorporate something that will be meaningful and hopefully adoptable and adaptable, we should be able to bring it back as soon as possible. Thank you very much. There's nothing else. We move. Does anyone need time for personal privilege?
No, we're almost done.
Huh?
We're almost done.
Okay, so we're going forward.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Becker.
I need to do the closed session report.
Oh, yes. Okay, could I do just 17 and you, well, okay, yes, you need to know. Go right ahead, please do it because I'm at the end.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On a motion by Councilmember Villegas-Walker, second by Councilmember Silva, the City Council met in closed session at 11:30 a.m. pursuant to the closed session statement posted with the agenda. Councilmember Solomon was absent with all other council members present. A report was given to council on each of the two anticipated litigation items, and there's no action to report on either of them, but direction was given to staff on both items. With regard to the pending case entitled City of El Centro versus Cazaron Services Corporation, Imperial County Superior Court case number ECU 06590, direction was given to staff with no action to report. With respect to the pending case entitled Casillas versus City of El Centro, Imperial County Superior Court case number ECU 06694, the item was for information only with no action to report. Closed session concluded at 12:32 p.m. and that concludes my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 17 is an informational item. I'd ask the, excuse me, let me have a swallow. Item 17 is an informational item regarding the Ralph M. Brown Act. And I think it's important that we, the council, acknowledge that we have no intention of abandoning this, even though the state of California, through the governor's proposal, had said that it is not necessarily a requirement. We will continue to do as we've done in the past. The city clerk, and I think that it's important that we state that from the council level. Okay. Moving right along, the other items are 18 through 20 are informational items. We are missing, no recess. Any task force reports? Mr. Jackson, are you prepared to report on your meeting? Are you prepared tonight, or would you like to do it next meeting? Whatever. Are you ready? If you can ready, Mr. Jackson will report on the League of Cities meeting, and since he was our delegate.
League of Cities last week was attended by myself, the mayor, and Councilwoman Walker, and staff, I'm sorry. The resolutions that were passed and we spoke upon at a previous meeting, there was 5 proposed resolutions. 2 of them were rejected. There were the 3 that were passed were General Resolution 1, 2, and 5. General Resolution number 1 did have a proposed amendment that failed, that they wanted a little bit more clarification and wanted to the fines and such that were going to be, how they state that, it was not, it all came from the city first rather than being equally distributed throughout the different agencies that would fall under General Resolution 1. There was some discussion back and forth, but that motion failed. It's around 140 to 100. And then the motion was made to pass it as stated. So 1, 2, and 5 were passed. Speaking at the keynote speaker, and I noticed that our mayor brought his book. I too got his book. I thought he was a dynamic speaker. If everybody got to hear him, I was so impressed by his keynote speech at lunch. I also attended his breakout session after lunch. Got many ideas from him. We'll probably read the book, which is saying a lot since I don't necessarily always enjoy reading books, but he was so dynamic and brought forth so many good ideas that hopefully we could look to incorporate some of those ideas for the city of El Centro, and I'm sure some of the other cities that were involved with that, Calexico and Brawley, I'd spoken to some of their representatives. They were also impressed with his presentation. Any other questions? Any comments from anybody else?
Mr. Silva, do you have anything?
All right at the time.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah, officers, I thought Mr. Silva, anything? No. Ms. Walker?
What's the update on our library?
Our carpet's in. They're doing the punch list items. I'm sorry, Mr. Banks is not here. I thought he was here a second ago.
Maybe we could get an email update
Sure.
by the end of the week. That would be great.
Oh, excellent. Sure.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Is Councilmember Walker, as the update, the medical marijuana update, did that?
Yes, thank you. Did see as an informational item because of the recent decisions that have come down or not come down, action or inaction. Ms. Becker's office did provide us with a comprehensive update.
Okay, as a member of the board for the League of Cities, the board took action on several of the propositions that are out there. Proposition 30, we took no position, and that's the Schools and Local Public Safety Protection Act. Proposition 31, the Government Preference and Accountability Act, was no position. Proposition 34, Savings Accountability and Full Enforcement, or SAFE, was for California Act Death Penalty Repeal, that was an oppose. And then Proposition 35, California Against Sexual Exploitation, was a support. This one was, I think, advanced by the city and county of San Diego, and they were quite happy with their getting this kind of support. Proposition 36 was the Three Strikes Reform Act of 2012, and that was no position. Our new officers for the incoming year, find it. Well, maybe I'll find it. Bill Bogart will be the new president. Okay, Bill Bogart was the new president, and let's see if I can see. Gosh, where's the other guys? Well, I thought they had listed all of them. Anyway, we do have a new president, and let me apologize for fumbling through these papers here at the last minute for you. Our next board meeting is scheduled for the first of the year. We trust that next year will be a better year for us.
So optimistic, Ms.
Yeah, and again, Ms. Sanders, frequent topic of discussion during the league meeting was how dysfunctional and how much partisan politics has essentially resulted in stalemate both in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. And we're hoping that the league board would entertain some kind of direction or take a leadership role in holding our electeds accountable at that level to lead, as opposed to just this bickering that has resulted in a stalemate at all levels.
I did take that message to the board. The new president seems prepared to become engaged. The executive director seems prepared to become engaged. A new task force is formed to help promote that concept. Yours truly will be serving on that task force, so we hope that we're able to have some measure of success. Is there anything else to come before this body? Successor agency and development, no meeting. Successor agent, housing agency, no meeting.
We do have a community enhancement task force meeting tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 11:30, and we have the successor agency at 3. Is that correct?
The oversight committee.
The oversight committee at 3. So we have a full day. Did you have something you want to add? Okay, you just...
I have one thing I forgot to report on. Centinela Citizens Advisory Board met last week. Subsequently, after that meeting, I think you probably read in the paper, and I think we also got notices, is the warden has...
disappeared.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. We're not really sure, and I haven't been able to get clear...
Very odd.
Yeah.
They're not saying.
They're not saying, and it's not...
Is he ill?
Don't know.
I don't think so. I'm not really sure, and I think the public affairs officer has been told not to divulge very much information. But in the absence or in the interim period of whatever they're going to do, Amy Miller, which had just recently been promoted about 2 months ago to the assistant warden, is been promoted by the governor as the interim warden until they figure out what's going on. But all indications are is the warden is no longer going to be coming back, but I don't know how that's going to work out. So,
Was it a full board there? Did you have a quorum out there?
yes, but they didn't discuss it. There was no action or no discussion. The letter from the state, and evidently the public affairs officer might have known something was amiss, but the actual letter from the governor's office didn't come until 2 days after the CAC meeting. So there was no comment at the CAC meeting.
Okay. Hearing nothing else, is there anything else to come before this body? Hearing nothing, seeing nothing, and there's no public comments at this point. Good night, and Mr. Silva, you didn't announce your event on, isn't it Saturday?
Ms. Walker. Sanders, thank you. I'll remind the council about our Grito celebration Saturday. We expect a lot of people there. In the past, we've had as many as 5,000 people show up, and hopefully we'll get the same kind of turnout. Yeah, it'll be nice.
The meeting is